Welcome to the Ken McElroy Show.
Hey,
Last episode of the year.
Oh, that's right.
I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
Hopefully you guys had a great holiday and even better New Year's coming up.
Yeah, we had a weird Christmas this year.
Yeah, it was, obviously a little bit of COVID around and both
not
families.
Us.
Yeah,
not us.
But
both families had some COVID.
Yeah, so we had some Zooms and some FaceTimes and some dropping off food and presents and at people's doors.
And then we just went and saw
and
a movie.
Cookies. I know. Yeah, it was weird. It's the first time I haven't had Christmas with my two boys.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting.
Yeah.
So
that was weird.
Yep.
But, I know a lot of people are in even worse situations. I mean, we have friends of ours whose parents are actually in the hospital.
Yep. Nobody got real sick or anything.
We're still blessed and grateful for what we had, and not as bad as some, but it was weird.
Yep, definitely. So we today are going to be talking about leaving your 9 to 5, or actually why we can't work a 9 to 5 any longer after working for ourselves. But we'll kind of...
Well, yeah. First of all, I would say that you're pretty unemployable at this moment. What do you say?
You're unemployable as well.
I would completely agree with you, but
Yeah.
The point is, once you get the taste of that, what I call eat what you kill, and kind of make your own money, it's hard to go back. And I know people who've tried, sold their businesses and gone back, and there are some skills that you learn from being an entrepreneur, starting your own business. A lot, actually. Not a lot are taught, but you do learn a lot.
You definitely do. And I understand, we talk a lot about real estate investing on this channel. And I understand people that do work 9 to 5 jobs, because a lot of people work 9 to 5 jobs to try to save money, to invest, to be able to leave their 9 to 5 jobs.
Yeah. And by the way, I'm not advocating that you quit.
Right.
Your 9 to 5. What I'm advocating is that you have some side hustle. We talk a lot about this, and you start to learn the reasons why. If you just have that as your sole point of income, then I think you're actually in the most vulnerable position that you can be.
Yeah, definitely.
And the pandemic proved that pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's nice, you get to work 8 hours, and there's some benefits of a 9 to 5, right? Because you can work 8 hours a day, you leave, you check out, you're done. As an entrepreneur, it's never the case.
Yeah, you could still invest heavily in real estate and still work 9 to 5. That's the real estate investing piece that we teach here, is to give you the option.
Right.
That's all. You just want options.
Definitely. And I see Austin here. Greetings from Fountain Hills. So Greetings, Austin. We live right around there. So, and then we have Nate here from Russia. So people from near and far.
Very good.
So
I got caught in Russia once, by the way, without a passport. That was scary.
I'm sure. So why can't we work a 9 to 5? So what are some of the reasons that we can't work a 9 to 5 anymore? We're done with that. Yes.
Well, I first of all, I want to acknowledge the fact that it's like the biggest crossing you'll ever make.
From employer to, or employee to
from that paycheck, from that, from going to work every day, and there are a lot of things that a lot of people do get trapped in those 9 to 5 jobs. By the way, I don't think they're 9 to 5 anymore, are they?
No, they're like 8 to 6 or something.
Yeah. So let's first start with how it all started. So back in the 1800s, when these big industrialists were like cranking away and taking people basically from farms and hardworking Americans, and this is just America, they were putting them in the factories, and I'm talking about Rockefeller, Ford, Carnegie, all that stuff. So people were working 12 to 14 hours, and the conditions were bad.
Yeah.
So that's when the unions popped up. And there was all this stuff about time off, which of course makes complete sense. We've pretty much gone away from that. It used to be 8 hours. So Ulysses Grant passed a law called the National 8-Hour Law Proclamation, which and what they said was that it should be 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, and 8 hours of recreation. So that was kind of the plan at the time. Well, so we've been kind of in this system forever on this 8-hour routine. And going way back. All you got to do is look at this. And so what's happened though now is, if you think about it, people are, first we went from, like when I grew up, one working household. My dad worked and my mom was kind of stay at home, and she was a hairdresser too, but mostly stayed home with the kids, and that used to work. Then now it obviously got to 2 people working in the home, and now we actually have more than 2 people in the home just to make ends meet. So
working 2 or 3 jobs.
Yes, yeah. So just in my lifetime, I've watched this slowly get worse, and people are working harder, in my opinion. Employers are finding it more difficult to make a profit. Now, don't forget that is important, because if you work for an employer and they're not making their margins and they're not making profits, then they're making cuts. They're making cuts on wages. They're freezing wages. They're making cuts in the number of employees they have. So it all starts at the money of wherever you're working. And I think a lot of times, I remember my brother when I got out of college, and he said to me, he's helping me write a resume, and I said, what should I put at the top, and he's like, well, put that you'll do anything that you can to help the employer make money, or something like that. And I was like, what are you talking about? That makes no sense to me. It was completely foreign at the time. And what I realized is, if you start to take a look at businesses that don't make it, there are a lot of reasons, but if you're an employee up underneath that, so the choice that you make on where you work is very, 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 very important.
Yeah. But we're trying to tell them though, like I don't think that they want to work the 9 to 5. So we have to tell them.
No. And what I'm trying to build is a case for the uncertainty. Mm-hmm. And I want people to understand that, there's one thing that when you come to work every day and do your job, but there's a whole nother piece above that, where the employer or the executive team or the ownership or the partnership or whatever it is making decisions on how that company's doing from year to year to year. And so what I'm trying to articulate is that the employee has very, very little control over whether or not they're there year to year, and a lot of it has to do with contracts renewing, or the employer or the partnership have multiple generational strategic planning and things like that. And that's all I'm saying. So, and we saw that happen during the pandemic, and what I mean is, I just think that working a 9 to 5 job is very risky.
Yeah. I mean, there's stability in it too, though. I mean, you could argue either way. Yeah. Because if you have your own business,
and so can be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the one thing about being an entrepreneur, or having a side business, or having something that produces side hustle income, is it's completely on you.
Yeah.
And I think if you take a look for, hopefully you guys have read Rich Dad Poor Dad. If you haven't, one of the basic underlying rules of Rich Dad Poor Dad is that the rich don't work for money.
Right.
That is one of the biggest ones. And I think that people need to understand that money is a claim on your time, period. So if you think about it, if you're serving somebody a cup of coffee, or you're drafting a legal agreement, it's just the price per hour that you're either charging or expensing. So it's a claim on your time. And so for me, one of the things that I was trying to do to get out from under this 9 to 5 piece was to have my time back.
Right. And so that's one of the reasons that we couldn't work a 9 to 5 again, is because you have no control over your time. And that's probably what a lot of you really hate about working a 9 to 5 or working for somebody else is you can't control your own hours. You can't take off time when you want. You're very controlled on how to use your time.
That for me. I know a lot of people focus on the financial part, and maybe I did initially too. But for me, I wanted to get my time back. So as an example, I spend every morning on my health. Yeah. So the gym, I meditate, I stretch, I write in my journal, I do things like that in the mornings. And then my day starts basically around 11 o'clock.
Yeah, Mr. Wright said, it's an addiction of a regular paycheck, and healthcare is huge. And that's the stability that we're talking about. You have a regular paycheck coming in every week, and you have healthcare, and that's why a lot of people, stay in that. I think the other thing that we don't do, or why we couldn't work a 9 to 5, is because we can't handle someone telling us what to do. We want to make our own decisions. I don't want my boss telling me how to do something that I can do more efficiently. I'm sure you've all been there. So that is another reason, we won't be able to work a 9 to 5.
Yeah. That's very, very true. I like having control of my future. I like having control of the money that I want to make and the time that I want to spend with people or friends or family. Many of you know I take off basically when my kids were little. I would take off all summer and be with them. When they had spring break, I would take that off. When they had fall break, when they were going to school, I would take that off. I would take summer break off. If they had a 3-day weekend, I would take that day off. So those are choices that I had because of that. Now, I could have worked on those days and made more money. There's no question. But the fact is that I didn't. It was a choice, and I wasn't working for anyone. And so when my kids were growing up, I had those choices. I do the same thing around my health on vacations. I'm super scheduled for the next 6 months on really fun stuff. Going to Mexico twice. We're going to the Kentucky Derby.
And we can do all those things because we have our own business.
Yeah. So those are things that we're doing. So obviously the business provides me the time, but it also provides me the income to go do those things. And so there's nothing wrong with starting with a 9 to 5. I started that way. You started that way. I think most people start that way. But the school does not teach people how to make money. It predominantly teaches people how to be an employee. And the big issue that I have is and I get it. I employ 300 people. So, people come here for a steady paycheck. They come here for the health care. They come here for the stability, but they're relying on me growing my business. And if I don't, I have to make cuts.
Yeah.
And that's the brutal reality of it. I don't think employees have a lot of control over their time or their income.
Yeah. And they also, they don't get to be creative. When you're doing the same job all the time and you're doing the same thing every day, another reason we can't work a 9 to 5 is we like to dabble in a whole bunch of different things. So both of us own multiple businesses that do multiple things, and our days are never boring. They're never the same.
Yeah. And by the way, it seems overwhelming to some. And I will tell you that you just got to start with one thing. So that's why I teach real estate investing. For me, I really enjoy teaching it. Obviously, I don't need to. We have north of $1 billion worth of assets that kick off millions of dollars a month. But I'm enjoying this because I want people to understand the financial freedom and the way to get your time back. I think it's the most important thing to be able to spend. I was just talking to a friend of mine this weekend who lost his father, and he said to me, he goes, I remember because I was with my dad when he died. Literally, I was the last one to see him alive, and I was able to take a couple weeks when his health was going downhill, and I hung out with him the whole time, and I wasn't. I still had income coming in. And so these are things that you can't anticipate. And I know that's kind of a low point, but it's the fact. It's a fact that I was able to go do that. And to this day, it's one of the things that, I'm I'm very happy with that. One, that I was there, but also I got to spend the time with him on his the limited amount of time now that he had.
Yeah, and if you guys are watching, make sure you hit the like button. We'd really appreciate that. That always helps us out. Also, I'll be teaching a seminar on how to budget, which is going to be really great as far as starting your own 9-to-5. It'll be on January 19th if you go to kenmcelroy.com/webinar.
Yeah. So the other thing before we jump off of here, I think, we all know at my age now, guys, I've had a lot of friends that went straight into work after high school. And a lot of them also went to college. And they were on very different paths. And some of them have done pretty well. I know several that work, because I grew up in Everett, Washington, which is where Boeing, they make the 747s. So a lot of people from my high school went straight to Boeing, went to work, and they got these high-paid jobs. And, at the time, they were high-paid. But, again, nothing wrong with that. But, they're working 33, 35 years at the same place, and they get these pensions, and it's super managed. But I think that they're pretty limited. And what happens a lot of times is they're especially with inflation, the way, they're limited on the things they can do today. So it's hard for me to relate with a lot of these people, because they're talking about still like saving up for a vacation, for Mexico. And I understand that, because I used to do these kinds of things. But you're limited on the amount of raises that you can get, and at the end of the day, especially, the worst thing you could do is turn your money over to a financial planner, which is what people in my family did, and just open the statement once a year, or maybe meet with them once a year, if you even do that. And it's just it doesn't make sense to me that you would go work for somebody for your entire life, limit the amount of money you can make, limit your time, work for somebody else, make them a lot of money, turn your money over to a financial planner, and eventually one day sit down and decide whether it all made sense. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, definitely. And Flippin' Holmes said, he loves having his own business because he doesn't have to ask for permission to take vacation or time off. And Mr. Wright says, watch out. She's putting us all on a fiscal diet, and you're next, Ken.
I know. Well, the other piece I want to there's an illusion out there about retirement. And I think this is an important topic, because basically what retirement means is when you stop working to actually go do fun stuff. Right? To a lot of people, that's what that means. And hopefully they can, because they have the money. So I got asked this question the other day. Somebody said, actually, you were there. They're like, when are you going to retire? I'm like, well, What does that even mean? Like I've been financially retired for a long time. I'm doing this because I want to. But I'm not working more than I want to either. Sometimes I am. Sometimes I get sucked into my business for weeks at a time, and I'm like, okay, and I need to back away or hire more people or figure it out. But the point is complete freedom. I think that a lot of times people are moving toward this retirement thing like it's some like amazing thing. But it's there's a social connectedness about going to work, and there's a social, when you unplug yourself from a lot of things, it's not necessarily healthy either. And the same thing happens when people sell their companies or sell their businesses, So I think that there's a fine line about, I think time and money are two different things, and there's a fine line about deciding when do you want to stop, because then it's like, well, then what do you want to do after that? But when you're in a 9-to-5 position, you don't have that choice.
Yeah. Well, how can people transition? I think it's important for us to let them know how they can transition from 9-to-5 to being entrepreneurs, because you can't just quit your job one day. Most people can't, and then just start something and live off of it.
So that is the entire reason I'm doing this whole podcast and this whole channel and all of that is to try to let people know that if you're working your butt off and you're putting your money into a pension or a 401k or something, there's nothing wrong with that. But then you need to understand that there are ways for you to take that money and self-direct it into your own investments, and you have to be careful. Okay, but now you're what my partner says. You're going from the bay to the ocean. Right now, letting your financial paycheck or putting money away through some kind of routine wealth manager can grow over time if they invest it well. But you have to get financially educated on the other side of this. So my sister, as you know, was a bookkeeper. And she made an okay salary, not great, but literally was a bookkeeper her entire life. And she has 20 rentals or something now, and she slowly chipped away at it. And she's got a better net worth than most people that worked in corporate America and had their money, let's say, sitting in the stock market or whatever. Not everyone, but in a lot of cases. So it can be done in a number of different ways. It's not quick money, it's not fast money, and I think a lot of people are looking for that. And I think you just start with one thing, and it doesn't have to be real estate.
Right.
It can be anything that makes money. I was sitting with a young man last week where all he does is take stuff from China and sell it in the U.S. for a margin. That's it. And now he's got 6 employees. So it could be anything.
Yeah, you just have to start slow. When you guys start a secondary business to get out of your 9-to-5, whether that's through real estate or through something else, it's all about a slow transition. When I started my first company, it took me a year to cut back from full-time to part-time of my 9-to-5 job. And then it took me 3 additional years to live solely off of that entrepreneurial income. Working part-time. So I think it just takes time. And, the goal this year would be to start. I mean, you're at the end of December. It's the end of 2021. Why don't you just start something, right? And build it over time while you work your 9-to-5 and get out of it. Because if you never do that, you're just going to be sitting here next year still in your 9-to-5, still wanting to leave your 9-to-5.
Right. Yeah. And guys, listen, just pour yourself into the internet and solve a problem, solve somebody's problem. It might be a real estate Airbnb. It might be a short-term deal. It might be a long-term deal. It might be a student housing deal. It might be an office deal. That's all just real estate. But just solve somebody's problem. They're everywhere. And most of the big companies, if you really take a look and dig in, started during recessions. So just look at what's going on right now and solve the problem. There's so many ways to make money. It's beyond belief. And just study some entrepreneurs, go out and look and emulate, what my friend calls it R&D, rob and duplicate. Go look at, that's what Lyft did to Uber. It happens all the time. Just go look at a model. How can you improve it and do it? And do it on your weekends, do it in your evenings. All you do is you just got to make the commitment to do something, because all you're trying to do there's nothing wrong with having that monthly paycheck. I get it. But you want to have different sources of income, whatever they are. And there's no better time.
So how people want to know how you kind of transferred, like a quick version of how you transferred from working for somebody else to being out on your own.
Well, my competitive advantage was I was in the property management world. So I was already in real estate. So it was all around me. I was watching investors invest. So when I finally got the courage to go out and do that with my own money, I did it. And I bought a 2-bedroom, 2-bath that cash flowed. I think it was less than $200 a month, but it cash flowed. And but then I quickly ran out of money. So then I had to figure out how to save more. It took me a while to go out and buy the next one, which I did do. But then I realized that I was limited because it was all about my savings. So and then from there, I started realizing that all I got to do is keep these things full and the tenant was covering my mortgage.
So you basically saved up money to buy rentals while you were working as a property
Yes.
manager until you could slowly transfer
Yes,
over.
right. And then eventually I did that enough. And then the cool part is luckily the real estate market went up during that time. But there were two things that were happening. One, the real estate market went up. So what I bought went up, which was good. That doesn't always happen, by the way. Two, the tenant was paying down my mortgage. So I was like, this is cool. So let's say you had a $100,000 mortgage. Well, as the tenant pays you rent, then you pay down that mortgage, and then all of a sudden your mortgage principal goes down too. So I had a appreciation and mortgage principal pay down, and I had tax benefits. So these are all things that I stumbled on, guys. I did not know all of this stuff when I was a property manager. So I just started. But what I did do is I had money also with a financial planner. So I remember I gave him like $2,000. It was a lot of money to me back in the day right after I got out of college. And I kept looking at that statement. I was like, his name was Bob. And I was like, Bob, like, this is like still $2,000. It was still $2,000. It's still $2,000. So I had this, obviously it has a lot to do with what he invested in and what the stock market did and all that kind of stuff. But the point is I was like, it was pretty flat. And so I was like, okay, it obviously makes better sense for me to take whatever cash I had instead of giving it to him is to go out and look for other ways. And that's how I started.
Yeah, very cool. And Eli says he started 9 to 5 as a tradesman, then he started a house hack, and then Airbnb.
Yep. Good for you.
Yeah, and then Brittany says people have to stop being complacent with where they're at in life. And I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And that is going to be what 2022 is about, everyone. Get out there and start something. Even if you start small, who cares?
Yeah, that's a really good point, that complacency. I think a lot of times it's really just a mindset and a laziness.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's a lack of confidence too.
It could be.
So anyways, make sure you slam the like button. Also, make sure to check out my webinar on January 19th. It's free. I am going to show you how to budget. I am the queen of budgeting, as Ken knows. And that's at kenmcelroy.com/webinar. Ken actually hates that I budget so much, but it's okay.
Yeah, I actually do need
one of
it
us
a
has
little
to
bit.
budget.
I know.
So now we're going to hop into our premium questions. We do these every week. kenmcelroy.com/premium, code premium live for a week free. We will always answer your questions.
All right.
All right. Darla is asking, please explain how a stock market crash would affect the real estate market.
Sure. Well, first of all, I don't know that we want a stock market crash because there's a lot of people that have a lot of money in there. Most money, if you think most managed money, is in the stock market. Most big money is in the stock market. So a lot of housed money is in the stock market. So what a crash does is obviously moves money into something else. It just looks at it as being more risky. So at the moment, the stock market is a good place to be for a lot of people. And so you think about it, a lot of people that are in there, I have a lot of friends that are in there that they're like, why would I invest in real estate when I'm doing so well in the stock market? So but what they fail to realize, in my opinion, is that if they sell their shares or sell their positions, then they pay some pretty big tax, and they don't, which is fine. But in real estate, you can do a 1031 and kind of roll that tax into the next thing. So I am obviously very biased and very partial to real estate, but the stock market is a distraction. Just like anything else, just like real estate investing. So there are bubbles in the real estate investing. There are bubbles in the stock market. There are bubbles in the bond market. There are bubbles in a lot of different things. So the gold market, the silver market, all those kinds of things. So you just got to watch each one and know when to know when to come in and out.
So does the stock market crash, create a real estate market crash per se, or is it kind of unrelated?
It's the $1 million question.
Okay.
In a lot of ways, it could be bad for real estate because there's a lot of the mortgages are actually sold off into the stock market. So if you look at the movie The Big Short, I think it was, which was kind of
That's a great movie to break it down.
Yeah, The Big Short is basically they take these mortgages, they package them up into mortgage-backed securities and sell them off into the markets, and people buy them, and so what you want is the you want to be in assets that produce income. And I think one of the things back in the day that you used to be able to invest in a company, and the profits of the company produced some kind of a dividend against the stock. It's very different now. The stock market is very different now. We saw that during, when Robinhood came up and all these people during the pandemic and all that started throwing all this money. That what it did is it spiked all these. I mean, why is it like why did AMC? We went to a movie this week. Like that thing was like a ghost town. Like why is AMC stock going like this? It's absolutely positively has nothing to do with the fundamentals of the chain.
Well, the stock market's not related to fundamentals at all anymore.
That's what I mean. So that's the thing that real estate has is but there are things in the stock market that people are investing in. So your question was, how does it affect it? It could affect it negatively, but it also could affect it positively as well, as people try to pull their money out if they haven't lost it.
Yeah. PC has a great question on YouTube. He said, MC Company's business plan is dependent on tenant payments.
Yeah.
Do you ever picture an economic scenario so bad that tenants can't keep up with landlords' necessary rent?
Yeah, like the pandemic. So we went through this. If you think about it, this was a wake-up call for the whole industry. We think about when everybody got sent home in March, we had already collected March rent.
Right.
What we didn't know was whether April and May would be paid.
Right.
So this was the biggest test on the whole industry. And so Ross and I, we went back and we looked at with all of our executive team, where are we, from an occupancy standpoint, from a rent payment standpoint, where are we? And there's this thing called the break even. So break even is expenses plus mortgage. That's it. So as an example, our break evens, once you add up all the expenses, this is everything. This is marketing, taxes, insurance, payroll, all of those things are all lumped in there. And then you have your mortgage payment. And then you divide that into the gross potential rent. That's what we call your break even. So we looked at all of our break evens. And basically what that means is if you collect less than that, you're not breaking even. If you collect more than that, then that obviously goes to you or your investors. So that was tested. And really the other thing that was tested is that you think about what the governments don't want. They don't want homelessness. We saw this firsthand in LA County. And of course, I'm from Seattle, so I've seen it there. I've seen it in Portland. I've seen it in San Francisco. I was in all those places in this last year. And it's horrible. And it drives out business and drives out all this stuff and it creates all these other issues. So the government, in my opinion, if you go back and look at history, they've used things like tax credits and Section 8 housing, vouchers, and all those kinds of things to be able to keep people in housing.
Right.
So a landlord, albeit the government can come in and say, we're going to cap your rent, like through rent control, and they can jack your property taxes through the property taxes because that's where they get a lot of the money for a lot of things that they need. But at the end of the day, it's highly unlikely. As we saw during the pandemic, the government gave people money, and those people then ended up paying their rent and mortgages largely.
Plus, people figure out how to pay their rent. I mean, whether they shack up, like two families shack up together, or two roommates shack up together, or somebody moves from a 2-bedroom to a 1-bedroom, or somebody moves out of farther out of the city center, like we're seeing in Arizona. People are going to pay their rent. They have to have somewhere to live. So there always will be the demand out there because there is such a low supply. Yeah. But people might have to get creative in doing so.
Yeah, and in 2008, we went through this as well. I went through it. What happened then was housing prices crashed and the mortgages were worth more than the house. So people defaulted where? Into rentals. And that will happen again. So, so you got, obviously, you think about it, this is probably not the greatest example, but you have the street, rent, and home ownership, let's say. So home ownership will collapse and it will go down, and then it'll put more emphasis on the rental housing, and then what's the choice after that? Government housing, public housing, all that stuff's been tried. So the government's that's why they put money in. That's why they give landlords tax breaks. That's why they create all these incentives on PPP, or private public partnerships. Well, and that's why they work with developers to develop housing to create that additional supply, because the demand's definitely there. So if we have a housing crash, it's gonna really put a massive problem, and unfortunately it'll spike rents, and all that stuff will happen because it's just a demand and supply thing. So which we saw in 2008. That is the reason we just went through this 10-year run that everybody thinks they're so smart over. I was like, look how smart we are. Well, what happened was in 2008, when people defaulted into rentals, we didn't have the supply to offset it. And so we had this incredible run over the last 10 years. So if you're a syndicator or you're a flipper or whatever, the market does go down. Trust me. A lot of people in the last 10 years have never seen that, but I've seen it multiple times.
Yep. It won't just keep going up. Dej from Premium is asking, which REITs in particular do you like?
I don't know. I don't follow them at all.
You're not really into REITs.
A REIT is a real estate investment trust, and they're so the way it works is you invest. There's private and public REITs, and you invest money into these REITs. So these REITs go out and buy real estate. So there are different brands and different types of real estate that people buy. So there are REITs that do senior housing. There are REITs that do industrial. There are REITs that do office. There are REITs that do multifamily. And there are REITs that do high-end multifamily. There are REITs that do value-add multifamily. So, and then there are REITs that invest in Seattle, and REITs that invest in Boise, and REITs that invest in Florida. So, it's a tough question. You have to actually look again at the underpinning issue of what the assets are. And do the assets make sense? And because the asset itself, where the money goes, the actual physical asset is the thing that actually produces the return. So the REIT is one thing, and then the people inside of that REIT and how they run it and where they invest and how they do, it has a lot to do with how it produces.
So Luis has a great question from Premium that I think would be good for people listening. He would like to become a successful real estate investor. What major or subject in college do you recommend preparing for my future career in real estate?
I think finance and economics are the two that I would focus on personally. And I will tell you, I think it's a fine line between economics and finance. And so oddly enough, I studied a lot of economics, and what happens is, for me, if you can follow trends and you can kind of see where things are going, then you can be in front of it and invest. And so some of the smartest people I know started off, and they originally wanted to become CPAs, let's say, and they started off in finance. Finance pretty much drives the world.
Yeah, if you got to understand numbers.
Yeah, you do. You have to understand. Like, my son graduated from college, and he went to work. Is at work at a really exciting, young, successful company that lends money. And I said to him, if you can understand why somebody gets money, then you'll be a lot more ahead than I was at your age, because people come to go get money, whether it's you getting money to buy a home or to start a business or whatever. There's a whole process of figuring out, because people who lend money want that money back. So once you kind of see how money works, then you have a massive advantage. And then if you can mirror that with trends, then all of a sudden It's the light bulbs start going off, because if you know how to get the money and you kind of see the future a little bit based on trends, then you put that money to work, whether it's yours or somebody else. That's how real big money is made.
Definitely. And Ray from YouTube has a great question. He said, what separates people that fail in real estate and business and ones who don't? What is the big difference?
Gosh, that's a loaded question, but there's
a few things.
There's a lot to it. What do you think?
I think understanding the numbers as far as real estate goes, because if you don't understand the numbers and you just are buying on gut instinct or what your realtor is telling you to do, then you're probably going to fail. And I also think commitment on a business level, because I think people want to get successful quickly, and we were talking about this last night, these get rich quick kind of schemes, when really how you really make money and you really have a successful business is just slowly growing it step by step and being committed. Because we all have friends, the guy or girl that starts the business and then 6 months later they're on to something else because they're trying to hit that jackpot. They'll never have a successful business.
Yeah. I think you got to understand, real estate doesn't go up all the time.
Yeah.
So whenever I'm buying something, I'm always looking at my potential issues that I might have with that piece of real estate. So I'm looking at it. I look at partnerships that way, probably because I've been in failed partnerships, and I've also had failed real estate deals back in my early days. And so I think, especially now, you guys really need to be careful. In the last 10 years, if you really think about it, there's been a tremendous amount of wealth made in both real estate and the stock market. And so people believe that next year is going to be better. And I think that you need to understand, or at least to approach everything with especially if you're meeting with seasoned real estate investors, they've been through ups and downs. And so if you haven't thought that through or don't have a contingency plan, then I think that could be one massively big mistake. You have to. So when we buy something, we have multiple options, but one is obviously cash flow. So we always make sure they cash flow.
Always.
But not everyone does that. Some people buy on something and hope that it goes up. That's the number one rule that I always follow. The second one is I like a forced equity. So what that means is when I'm buying something, I look at, like I just put something out on Instagram. I was in Texas last week, and we have a property that's a $50 million value add. That's 50 million, and that's the growth piece, not how much the property's worth. So how did I get there? Well, because the property is going to have a $400 rent increase times 455 units at a 4 cap. That's $54 million. So that's my plan. So I'm buying something that's undermanaged, undervalued, and we're improving it through operations and breathing new life back into this property. It's 17 years old, beautiful property in Austin, Texas. So that's called forced equity. Now, is it possible that I'll have rent growth in Austin, Texas over the next 2 years? Of course, but I'm not banking on it.
Right. You're okay if you don't.
Yeah, right. Because I'm forcing equity. I'm taking something that is broken and I'm fixing it. So, so those are some steadfast ways that that as a real estate investor, I'm always looking, because I know at some point I bought in Austin when the rents have gone down. I've been there in 2005. So I've been buying in these different markets at different times, and rents don't always go up, and occupancy is not always high, and job growth sometimes flattens, and things happen, and so you have to be thinking all those things through before you're raising money or you're investing your own.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think people really, we get questions all the time of, I'm going to buy and the rents are going to go up, so I'm just going to wait and fund the project until that happens. And that's where you get yourself in a lot of trouble.
I know a lot of people that have gotten had to file bankruptcy because of that. And I'm not saying that you can't have a balance of that. So as you guys know, we also do development. So Ross and I, we have 5 ground up construction deals. One is under construction now, 330 units, and we have 4 more that we're doing. And those are much more risky. Much more risky, and that's how a lot of people invest. They invest based on future stuff, and you want to know what stuff keeps me up at night. It's that stuff, the stuff that I'm buying, like I just explained, stuff that has tenants in it now, stuff in good locations, the stuff that has in place rent growth, in place management, in place people. In a growing area, that obviously, in my opinion, is much less risky than going out and buying land and building something. I do both because I have experience in both, and I don't have anything wrong with that. But I didn't start off doing new construction. I started off doing these, as I said to you, the cash flow, the forced equity, and it can come in all kinds of ways. I mean, the house hacking is a great example.
Yeah, we did a whole thing on that last month.
Yeah, there's a lot of great ways, guys, to start. You just got to start. And what happens is when you start to buy something, mortgage lenders come out of the woodwork, realtors come out of the woodwork, investors come out of the woodwork, and property managers come out of the woodwork, and you start to talk, you start to walk, and you've got 1, and then you have 2, and then you have 3, and now all of a sudden, a few years later, you've learned a lot, and your circle's expanded, your network's expanded, and it's just like anything else. It's like if no matter what hobby you do, no matter where you are, the minute, like when you first buy a boat and go out on the lake, you don't know anybody, well, let's say. And the next thing you know more people, and you get to know, you get a slip, and all of a sudden, it's just one of those things that's a process, just like anything else. So just start with 1, and your world will open up, and you just got to make sure that one, whether it's your money or somebody else's, makes money. Cash flows.
Definitely. So Wahayn from Premium wanted to know that you said that you keep 6 months reserve on your properties.
Yeah, we do now.
Do you put it in a checking or savings account, or do you keep it in a trust of some kind?
Yeah, so that's a good question. We keep it in the bank. I don't particularly like that, but we have it in the bank. Usually in the bank that we actually have the mortgage with. So we use a number of banks, and we have, I don't even know how many, a lot. I know I've got several hundred bank accounts. So we usually keep the cash in the bank that either services or financed that particular property.
Very good. Mr. Wright had a good question from YouTube. He wanted to know if buying a mobile home is a good first investment, because properties are kind of expensive right now.
Yeah, a mobile home park or a mobile home?
Just a mobile home.
Oh, okay. So I think mobile homes are, honestly, they're not all created equal, of course. You got to know. So I live in Arizona, and there's some incredible mobile home parks here.
We just passed one yesterday.
Oh, my gosh. Like some of these things are like over the top.
Well, they're in good areas.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, and then there's some that aren't. So again, location has a lot to do with, and rent and all that kind of stuff. The thing about mobile homes that the little bit that I understand, and I do understand a little bit, you have that monthly rent. So your mobile home's tough to move. So I think you pay a monthly rent.
You do. You pay, right, like it's a big HOA.
Yeah. And again, nothing wrong with that. But if something happens and your rents go up, again, you're paying somebody else rent. And I know you're charging more rent too. So it's a great way to come in. In Scottsdale, there's not very many. And I know that people that have bought some mobile homes have done very, very well, because there's no real affordability in Scottsdale. So if you can find a well-maintained mobile home, let's say under $100,000, and you can charge, say, $1,500 or something for it, I think it goes back to the math and the numbers.
And it does. And the other thing that you're at a disadvantage is we always talk about that fixed rate mortgage. Well, you don't have a fixed rate rent from your mobile home community. So as rents go up, your rent will go up, and then you can charge your tenants more, but you're not getting that extra cash flow of having that fixed rate mortgage and then charging more.
Yeah. So it's, again, but it has to do with the math, has to do with the location, has to do with the future of that area. You want to make sure, obviously, you're in an area that where you're going to see some rent growth.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Anyways, Joel from Premium wanted to know about water bills.
Yes.
He said, if I don't have a separate water meter for each unit, how do I charge the tenant for water without knowing how much they have used?
That's a good question. So we do this. There's just type in your browser RUBS, Resident Utility Billing System, RUBS. So you don't have to actually separately meter your water, but you do have to know. So you do have to know how much is used in the common area and how much is used in the non-common area. Let's say in the community. So let's say you have 20 units in somewhere, and you have a lot of grass and you have a pool and you have some other things. So, and then you have one water meter that handles all 20. What you need to do is figure out the allocation. There's a bunch of businesses that will help you with this, but there is a way for you to figure out the allocation. So let's say that the water bill is $25 per unit per month based on a 2-bedroom, let's say, or based on a square footage, or based on the number of occupants or stuff like that. Those are all things that you can figure out, and then you just put that into the lease. So what you would do, let's say, is you would say, you know what, water is $30 a month for this unit. And then you just add it in as part of the rent. So let's say the rent's $1,000, and then water is $30. And so you don't actually have to put a meter on there. You just need to charge the tenant for the water use. And then it's not they're not actually paying the water company, they're paying you. And then you actually use that to offset the water bill. So you'll still see the water expense, but you'll now be getting the revenue to pay for it.
Nice. All right, make sure if you are watching, you hit the like button. It really helps us out. It helps us create content for you. Secondly, make sure you sign up for the webinar on January 19th. We're going to walk through ways to budget so you can get out of that 9-to-5 job, so you can increase your real estate investing, and eventually so you can be out on your own. KenMcElroy.com/webinar to sign up. It's free. Okay, a couple more questions here. DL is asking, how can an individual person become a lender for deals without getting taken advantage of?
Wow. Well,
a lot of risk there.
Yeah. I think, first thing that I would do is I would go mentor somebody that does this. The last thing you want to do is lend money if you don't know how.
Yes.
So that's the first thing. Like anything, you just want to find somebody who does it. Then you want to get those agreements that they use and take a look at those, because everything at the end of the day goes back to the agreement. But if you think about what a lender does primarily is they lend against some kind of collateral. Mm-hmm. And so as an example, let's say you got a $200,000 house and you say, I'm going to give you $100,000. You put down $100,000. I'm going to give you $100,000. The house is the collateral. Now you got to make sure the house is worth $200,000. That's number one. But at the end of the day, you've got 50% exposure. You actually own the house. The debt is what we call it, is in the first position ahead of the equity. So if they default for some reason, you actually get the whole house. So that's a good position to be in.
Hey, you have to have stable collateral.
Yeah, you have to have
and
stable
first
collateral.
Position.
Yes, and first position. So where it gets a little dicey is when you start to put seconds and thirds on, because you got first position, second position, third position. Your positions are being watered down. So let's say the house is sold for $90,000, you lose 10. Let's say it's sold for 120,000, you get your 100 back, and then the people who put the equity down get the other 20, and they've lost from their 100, they only get 20 back. So you want to make sure that it's all about the collateral. But it sounded to me like the way the question was worded that you might not have a lot of experience. So the first thing is you want to go out and shadow those kinds of people. Don't just do it.
Yeah, and get a good attorney involved.
Yeah, and don't just pull something off the internet and lend somebody money. You're going to want to do a little bit of homework.
Yep, definitely. Last question here is from ML. I'm assuming they're talking about multifamily, but they're asking, should you project 40, 60, or 80% occupancy?
I wouldn't do any of those, actually. I can assure you, you're not probably making any money at 40 or 60. So again, going back to my break even, expenses, and this is very general, but expenses are going to run probably 40%, maybe 50% of your total income. So you think about expenses, you got property taxes, you got utilities, you got insurance, you got payroll, you got marketing, you got all of those things and more, the repairs and maintenance. And then on top of that, you probably have a mortgage. So those things can be, 60, 70% of the rent. And then what you're trying to do is solve for the top. So even 80% occupancy is probably not enough. It's going to be close. What you really want to do is you want to buy in a market where your occupancies are in the 90s for sure. And if you're looking at occupancies in the 40s, 60s, or 80s, you're probably not going to make any money.
Yeah. All right. Well, that wraps it up. Make sure you hit the like button, and we'll see you guys next week. Next week is the first of the year, so we'll be chatting about goal setting and what to do to be successful.
Yeah. Thanks again, guys, for listening. I appreciate your time, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.